Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Pilot Lawyer Podcast. Thank you for your attention while this important legal information is reviewed. What you hear should not replace consultation with an attorney and should not be considered advice for your situation. On behalf of the Pilot Lawyer and your entire crew, it's our pleasure to have you aboard.
Welcome, aviators, to the Pilot Lawyer Podcast with us, the Ison brothers at the Ison Law Firm. We're here to help pilots and those that want to become pilots navigate the FAA medical certification process. Around the office, we often say, if you don't laugh, you cry. So for the next 30 minutes, we hope to bring you the lighter side of what can otherwise be a frustrating process. So whether you're laughing at us or with us, join us, brothers, as we discuss the all too fascinating world of FAA medical certification.
Spectacular. Give me 14 of them right now.
And a bottle of sauce.
That's where he gets you. It's the bottle of sauce.
Yeah.
Like where the sauce come from, where we're not talking about sauce.
The thing is
the sauce syrup?
The guy didn't even know what they were initially because I guess the wife came and said, hey, you should
tell me what they are.
You know, do you want to know what they are? I don't want to know.
What's the backstory there?
But yet he wants a bottle of sauce.
Yeah. Why is she so amazed by the fact that it's only sweet potato and what was the other ingredient? I don't know.
Eggs.
Was that eggs? Yeah.
Eggs.
What has he been fed that's like he doesn't want to know? Back to your original query.
For those out there in podcast land, this is in reference to a viral meme that was probably...
It's a video. It's a reel.
Viral reel that's probably at this point ages old. It's probably 18, 19, 20 years old at this point for as far as we're so far out of the loop in these things. But anyhow, woman comes to her husband. I'm going to reenact it. I'm gonna reenact it right here. Don't bother to go find it.
Listener, this is how desperate we are for clicks.
Content.
Lady,
yes.
I'll do like the read in and you do the.
To be honest, I don't even. Yeah, I don't
woman hands man plate with oranges looking pancakes.
Man eats
pancakes and has a interested look on his face.
Then he says,
"Q, do you want to know what's in it?
Spectacular. Give me 14 more of them right now and a bottle of sauce."
Do you want to know what's in it?
No, I don't want to.
Don't tell me.
Don't tell me. Yeah.
We should have had someone who actually knew what to say.
But the bottle of sauce doesn't come till the end when he says, fantastic, bring me 17.
To be honest with you, I've not seen it that much. Anthony picked up on it, and then we just kind of started saying it, and then now suddenly I'm wearing a shirt that has it on
Somebody give this man his bottle of sauce.
Spectacular. Give me 14 of them right now.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what's in here?
I don't care. Don't tell me.
No, I'm going to tell you. 2 ingredients. Sweet potato and eggs.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Protein.
I want 17 with a bottle of sauce.
There you go. No sauce. Bye.
Yeah, good luck.
The funny thing is, too many people treat their medical certification that way.
That flippantly?
Here's my records. Here's my records. Don't you want to know what's in them? No, I don't care. Don't tell me. See how we brought that?
Well, yeah, I was gonna try to make some segue from that to talking about possession charges.
Oh,
which
good one.
I guess if you just
it's like, what about this needle here? Want to know what's in it? No, don't tell me.
Don't tell me. Just shoot me up.
Feels
right
fantastic. Bring me 14 of them.
That's too funny.
Well, can you get a medical certificate if you have a possession charge?
Well, what is a possession charge? You're the Mr. Prosecutor, and
I possessed something and they didn't like it.
All right, so here's the deal.
I've never
with
liked the word prosecutor. Let's just put that out there.
District attorney,
it's too close.
The DA,
too close to prosecutor.
You know what aggravates me is that I was a prosecutor, right? But we were in an area of the world where nobody ever referred to him as the district attorney. It was the state's attorney, right? So you're the state or the states, but in the movies and everything, it's always, the DA. Well, you don't really go around saying the SA.
Yeah.
that's like a Mexican friend, SA. but I always felt a little deprived. I didn't get to be
you got
called
that
the
cool
DA.
badge, though.
Yeah, that was cool. I did like having the badge.
We don't have badges here, but we could get some.
No, but so with possession, you have 2 forms, really. You have constructive and you have actual possession, right? So if you hadn't actually pooped the bed on criminal procedure in law school.
I didn't even take that. Just criminal law.
You didn't take criminal procedure. Good grief. Yeah, so there's actual, which is really as it sounds. You actually possess the item that you are accused of having.
What is my possession? Is it's in my pocket?
What is my crime?
What is my crime? do I have it in my pocket? Do I have it in my car?
Well, I think, sure, but then I think that gets into constructive possession. Is.
I mean, you sound like me.
Maybe that level is just too high for criminal law, and that's why they just couldn't.
That's why you had to go federal.
They got federal crimes too.
The idea there is that there's different forms of possession. I think that, and the simplest idea is that there is possession that you actually are like physically controlling. You got it like in your clutches of your little palms or in your pockets, and the pockets are attached to your body. And those pockets were your pockets. There was actually a case where someone, when I was a prosecutor, argued that even though they had marijuana in their pocket, it wasn't their pants. That's not my pants, even though it was on them. They just, I guess, woke up from some stupor and threw on the pair of pants they found lying around and just happened to have weed in it.
Well, a more articulate version for ourselves is the difference between actual and constructive. Would you like to hear that from ChatGPT?
Because
that's very accurate. We'll tell it if it's right. Actual possession is a simpler, more obvious form of possession. It means the item, like a controlled substance or firearm, is physically on your person or within your immediate control.
Hey, who? Isn't that what I just said?
Similar to what you
Isn't
just
that
said?
What I just said?
A vape pen with THC in your pocket, for example, your jacket pocket. A firearm in your waistband. You got a piece on your waist, on your
piece
side.
In a person.
Which sound wrong? Pills in your hand or wallet.
Where's the wallet?
Where's the hand?
That's not my hand.
Prosecutors usually have. That's a prosthetic.
Yeah, somebody had a prosthetic.
A prosthetic. I wonder.
That's not my hand.
It's a
There's the manufacturer.
very
Still
interesting,
making payments.
Very interesting lawyering. Prosecutors usually have an easier time proving this, especially if the item is found directly on the person.
So then you have, let me before you read constructive,
let's see how right you are.
Let's see how right and wrong I am. Constructive possession is that which there is, multiple people around said substance, but you could have control of the substance if you so chose. So like you're sitting in a car, it's a 4-seat car, you got a driver, passenger in the front, passengers in the back, and you got, a big old bag of Coke right there on the center console. Everyone in that car could essentially exert control over that substance such that they are constructively possessing it, even though it's not on their actual person or within.
That's very close.
Yeah.
Very close.
I mean, it's been 20 years.
The item isn't physically on you, but you still have knowledge of it and the ability to control it.
Yeah, so if that big old bag of Coke was in a clear cellophane bag and it had written on it cocaine, and you had just done a bump. I don't know any of the terminology. You just did a line, whatever, and so you knew, that bag got cocaine in it, and it's sitting on the center console. You're going to tick all those boxes here to show constructive possession. Now, if it's just sitting in like some kind of burlap sack that you can't see through, and you never knew, it's not your car. It's not your sack, and it's just sitting there on the center console. Why is any of this relevant to what we do on a day-to-day basis, Anthony?
I'm glad you asked.
It's not.
Next podcast.
Content filling. Content.
Question 18W on the medical application asks, have you ever in your lifetime had, essentially, any conviction for a non-traffic related misdemeanor or felony? So have you ever had a misdemeanor or felony conviction?
Non-traffic.
So if you're convicted of possession, of a possession charge, that's going to be responsive to 18W. Now, don't forget that you might also have a response to 18V as in Victor if you're arrested for a possession charge, but ultimately are not convicted if you have some history of having to go to a rehab facility or educational facility or treatment, or you've had some action against your driver's license.
I had to do a 1-hour educational course on the impact of drugs in my life as part of my...
And your charges dropped?
Yeah, my charges were
dropped. But you were
dropped.
arrested? Well, you'll have to report that because...
Well, but I didn't get a conviction.
Well, it doesn't matter because 18V says arrested, which results in attendance at an education or rehabilitation.
So something as benign as going to... just a 1-hour little education course. You think I still got that triggers a requirement under 18V?
It's not only benign, but it's benign. I was going to say benign. But correct. You'll have to report that because that's what 18V is eliciting. Much like the illicit drugs.
Is it eliciting or soliciting?
It's eliciting the information. Illicit.
Isn't
I'm eliciting this from you.
Is it soliciting?
It's soliciting, but it's also, look that up.
Is eliciting even a word?
Illicit? Yes.
Well, illicit is a word.
E-L-I-C-I-T, and then maybe I-L-L-I-C-I-T?
E-L-I-C-I-T.
Yeah, illicit.
Evoke or drawl out.
See?
A response or answer or fact.
I'd like to know the origins of the word.
I want to know the difference.
Okay, I'll just ask ChatGPT.
Right this second.
I'm going to say difference between solicit and illicit. E-L-I-C-I-T. The words solicit and illicit sound similar. Oh, yeah. That's where you got you got that part, but have distinct meanings and uses. Especially important in legal or investigative contexts, like those discussed on the Pilot Lawyer podcast. I swear it says that.
What? Let me see.
We're getting the shtick for looking up random words. So solicit means to ask for, request, or try to obtain, often with persistence. You actively go and seek something. Elicit means to draw out a response, feeling, or reaction, often indirectly or subtly. You cause something to come out from someone else. So,
insert
listener will let you do whatever you want with that one.
Laugh.
Elicit, though, I think they're eliciting because it's vague in nature, and they're trying to draw it out of you.
You know what? Spectacular. Give me 14 more.
Give me 14 more words.
So if you have such a history, it's not just convictions. It is also a situation as it relates to potential arrests. If you ultimately, had to go through one of these programs, or if you had an action against your drivers. I've seen cases where, had a case a while back where an individual had a marijuana possession issue. And just by nature of the fact that this individual was under the age of 18, this particular state had a statute that automatically took action against their driver's license was automatically suspended.
Yeah. That's what they do here in Florida if there's a conviction for a drug-related crime, at least when I was a prosecutor.
20 years ago.
Is it really 20 years?
No, it was only 15. But you would get your driver's license suspended as a result of that.
Which has its own interesting conundrums. If you have, I'm going to pull up 6115. Although 6115
I think that's
is
only
relative,
for the operation of a motor vehicle.
That is absolutely correct as it relates to your obligations to report it. But 6115, so in theory, is only as it relates to motor vehicle action as a result, essentially from a statute. I'll say right here, conviction or cancellation, suspension, or revocation of a driver's license or license to operate a vehicle for a cause related to the operation of a motor vehicle while intoxicated by alcohol or a drug, while impaired by alcohol or drug, or while under the influence of alcohol or drug. So in theory, that doesn't have any connection or nexus to a possession charge, especially if it's not a use charge and so on. But 6115A does say conviction for the violation of any federal or state statute relating to the growing, possessing, manufacture, sale, disposition, possession, transportation, or importation of narcotic drugs, marijuana, or depressant or stimulant drugs or substances is grounds for denial of an application for any certificate, rating, or authorization issued under this part, which is part 61, which is the part that issues your airman certificates for up to 1 year after the date of final conviction or suspension or revocation of certificate or authorization issued under this part. So what I'm getting at here is essentially if you have a possession charge, it has ramifications not only for your medical certificate, but potentially also for your airman certificate itself. But we're here to talk mainly about the medical certificate. So that's you. A long time ago, you asked, why would I care? And I said, well, hey, it's because I have these obligations.
I have a big heart.
I have a big heart. I care too much. I'm too caring.
It's a different podcast.
Yeah. You know what? I think that I would just be an old softy for some of these folks if I were a prosecutor.
No, well, this is what you got to do. If I were a judge, this is how I run my courtroom. First person goes in trial in front of me, they're getting the max, right? Now, granted, I'm never going to become a judge, and so I can say this with impunity.
You'll never become a judge.
I guarantee you, I will be out there working at Hooters as a waiter.
You got what it takes
before I become a judge. But you go in there and you set a precedent. You go in front of Judge Ison, he's going to give you the book, right? And so now nobody wants to go to trial. Everybody pleads out. You never got, sure, you can still go to trial. But if you go in front of Ison and lose.
But then what do I have to lose?
You're going to get the max.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, well, we'll make a deal with the prosecutor.
But don't you think the prosecutors, much like the FAA, are going to get
there was a judge.
They're not going to deal with you because hey, why would we deal with
There was a judge down there in Polk County whose first name was Dale, and like the courthouse nickname for him was "Send him to jail, Dale." I always thought that was really cool. Like, man, I wish I could have some kind of nickname like that. Like, you don't want to go in front of him. He's going to get the max.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's neither here nor there.
Has your FAA medical certificate been denied? Are you concerned you may not be able to get a medical certificate from the FAA? Are you at risk for FAA action for failing to report your medical history appropriately? Call the pilot lawyer at 1-855-FAA-1215 to discuss your options for getting the FAA to issue your medical certificate and get you flying. We are happy to evaluate your case and discuss with you a plan for presenting your case to the AME or the FAA. Aviation law is all we do, nothing else.
Let's say this, though. It's only a possession charge. It wasn't like they saw me,
Well,
hitting the ball.
I'm about to get to that.
I wasn't actually consuming it at the time.
I'm about to get to that.
Unlike a DUI, which, they show that I'm under the influence of the substance.
Well, I'm about to get to that.
I'm waiting.
But first, don't you want to hear today's cockpit conundrum?
Oh, Lord.
They call this one the forgotten backpack. The forgotten backpack.
Sounds like a constructive possession issue.
You're a regional airline pilot on your way to the airport for a 4-day trip. While going through TSA screening in your uniform, you're pulled aside. TSA agents found a vape cartridge containing THC in a small side pocket of your backpack. The same bag you use for personal trips. Well, that's a problem right there. Why are you using marijuana on your own personal trips? That's his own problem. But anyhow, you forget it was in there. You forgot. You're detained briefly, cited for possession of a controlled substance under local law, and released without arrest. TSA notifies the airline and you're pulled from your trip pending investigation. Here are some questions for discussion. Do you report this to the FAA immediately or wait to see if charges stick? See if you catch any charges.
I also enjoyed that when people would call us up and be like, hey, I caught a charge.
Yeah, caught a charge.
Who's throwing them out?
I remember the first time someone referred to a DUI as a Dewey. I thought that is just great. And then we had boating under the influences, which are buoys. Ahoy. Does this count as a motor vehicle action or substance abuse under Part 67 or 6115? If the
60 what?
Part 67 or 6115.
Oh, I thought you said 6715.
If the charges are later dropped or dismissed, are you still required to report it? Could this affect your eligibility for KCM or even future employment with major carriers?
There's too many questions.
There's too much I've proposed, but we can come back to that. But just think about this guy. He's going through.
Check your bags, people.
He's bringing his marijuana he's smoking on his personal time, which That's his own issue. And then he gets caught. Now, how did they know marijuana was in the vape pen? Did they stop and test it?
Maybe it.
Yeah, that's it.
Quite the conundrum.
Maybe it had big bold letters, marijuana.
Don't take this one to work. Set it right on the side.
I picked up my work pen.
All right, so we were talking about your medicals. So
let's cut to the guano here.
Yeah.
If you have a possession charge, what they're going to look at is whether or not you have substance abuse or substance dependence.
Yep.
As those terms are used in the medical regulations.
So let's say you have to report it. Let's say you've reported 18V or 18W. Now, there's also a thought process that you might have to report 18N as in November. Reason being is, what were you doing with the marijuana? Let's just say you had cocaine. Okay, let's just say you had cocaine. Possession of cocaine.
It sounds like a real fun time.
Yeah. So
that marijuana is a gateway, they say.
Wouldn't even know where to get it. So you
just ask our clients.
Not all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're insulting the clients, but we're happy to help if that is you. So 18N says, have you used any illicit substances in the past 2 years? Well, what were you doing with it? If you had the possession charge, there's some sort of insinuation that maybe you were using it, right? So, but it only has a 2-year look back for that question. So unless, of course, you tested positive for cocaine or some substance on a drug test, in which case 18N does have a lifetime look back. So 18N's a tricky one. So don't neglect 18N. But
N sounds nuanced.
Correct. So let's say you say yes to one of these questions. You're going to get deferred by the AME, Aviation Medical Examiner, and then the FAA is going to send you a letter probably 3 weeks, a month from then and say, hey, we need some information from you. One, we need a statement from you regarding your past, present, future plans for illicit use, right? So they're going to ask for, details about when you used it, how you used it, why you used it. Now I'll come back to this, but it gets into an interesting thing of, well, did you use it and so on. So we'll come back to that. Then they're going to ask for potentially a drug test to be performed within 48 hours of signing for your letter. So you're going to sign for this letter they send you. They say you got to go for usually a 10-panel drug test within 48 hours of signing for the letter. So you need to be careful to hit that 48 hours just right, because otherwise, if you're outside the 48 hours, that could be considered a refusal. Now, don't let grandma or your friend or whomever sign for your letter, because that triggers the 48 hours. We've had cases where people have engaged USPS to somehow they sign. It's like auto sign for certified mail. I wouldn't do that, because that sort of like the second it hits your mailbox, that's signed for. The FAA doesn't care who's signing for it. So the thought process is that
what's the point at that point?
Well,
why would they even allow that? Service.
What are you going to do otherwise? So
be there,
I guess. So you get the letter, and we've had cases certainly where people have they've missed it, or somebody else has signed for it. Usually in that case, we insist that the airman go for a test right away, get it, maybe a hair test, that has a longer look back as sort of an effort of good faith to show the FAA that, hey, listen, I didn't have this. This was an accident that I didn't take it within the 48 hours. So there are ways to kind of, try to assuage the concerns there if you do miss the 48 hours, but you should really try to not miss the 48 hours if you can. So they'll ask for that. They'll ask for the statement. I want to ask about your history. Now, if there was a possession charge, like you said, that we've reported, what we're going to have to provide there oftentimes is the arrest report, the narrative police report, if it's available, and any court-related records showing disposition, any treatment records from whether or not you were to undergo treatment or any type of rehabilitation as a result of the charge or otherwise. So they're going to ask for quite a bit of information. So it makes sense to have all that ready to go even before you see your AME. Now, as far as like the police report, if this is an old charge, you want to try to get that report, but if it's not available, you'll want documentation from the law enforcement agency or from the clerk of court identifying that there's no records available, that you just don't have anything, nothing that exists. You made a good effort to get the records, and the facility has either, or the law enforcement agency or clerk of court has demolish the records and that there's just nothing to give. So usually that's what they ask for. Sometimes they'll come back and ask for a substance abuse evaluation, and depending on the circumstances of your history, how recent the event was, how many there were, and so on, it makes sense to potentially proactively provide some type of substance abuse evaluation. But in a case like this, we would usually expect to just wait and see if the FAA even asks for it and see what caliber of evaluation they would want. For example, would they want just a substance abuse evaluation with someone like a substance use counselor, or would they like a full-blown psychiatric evaluation with a board-certified psychiatrist, or would they actually like a HIMSS-trained psychiatrist to do an evaluation with, board certification in addiction medicine or forensic medicine?
It sounds like a whole lot of thought there for somebody who didn't even consume it. I was just
that's where it gets
possession of
interesting.
it. So back to my original question.
If you had,
you just to hear yourself talk.
Yeah, if you had the possession, somebody seems to like to hear me talk. Why should we doing this? So you had the possession charge. The FAA's thought process typically is, well, we're using it, right, son? I mean, what else are you doing? And that's where it's going to kind of get into the details. If it was, hey, it was my
transport.
Yeah. It was my friends and whatever was in the car, and this was 10 years ago. It gets into this nuance of substance abuse versus substance dependence. If this was a one-off and it was greater than 2 years ago, the argument there, and typically what will happen is the FAA will say, well, unless there's anything else that's problematic in your history or you're identifying or flagging in your response to them, rightfully so, they might very well say, well, this is a concern. But if this was like a possession charge greater than 2 years ago, the regulation essentially allows for this thought process that really can't meet criteria for substance abuse. If this were within the past 2 years and there was some admission that, yes, I have used some substance within those past 2 years, the FAA is going to typically, at a minimum, call that substance abuse under the regulation and will require you to engage in some level of ongoing monitoring with a HIMSS AME and certainly have some type of substance abuse evaluation.
But that's if there was use within the last 2 years.
That's if there is use. Now, they could try to make that argument on possession within the past 2 years, but that's where it's going to get into the details of really were you using it or not, or was this a wrong place at the wrong time?
For the sake of an argument here, and then we can get to our cockpit conundrum.
That's the only thing I'll do. This only for the sake of the argument.
For the sake of the argument, let's get to that conundrum. But here's a thought. It was within the last 2 years. You got a possession charge. Let's say it's possession of marijuana, right? It's in your pants pocket, and the pants are yours.
Perfect.
You're convicted. You disclose it to the FAA. They come back. They want the police statement or police records or court records, blah, 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 blah. Give it all to them. Give them a personal statement. And you tell them, I've never used it, despite the fact that I was convicted of possession of it, right? Is that considered abuse because in the federal air surgeon's discretion, based on case history and the appropriate qualified medical judgment, that would be misuse of a substance?
Well, I would argue no. The abuse regulation requires misuse.
I mean, that's pretty straightforward. I don't know how you can.
Yeah, I don't have any. I don't know how you can. They don't have any evidence of use at that point. So they have.
Does this create a concern otherwise for a personality disorder?
Yeah, so you get into the situation where,
I can't get you out of substance abuse.
Yeah, I can't get you out of substance use, but I do have a concern that, why are you out there misappropriating your relationship with the authorities?
I was going to say misappropriating your relationship with your pants.
Yes, that too.
Well, substance carrying around.
Yeah, someone's prosthetic put that in there. So I think the problem there is that you could get into this realm of you just can't follow the rules. So maybe you have a personality disorder, but typically we'll see that maybe reserved for when there's multiple offenses, right? There's some pattern of some concern, if that makes sense.
Okay, let's get to that cockpit conundrum because I got things to do, and so do these fine listeners.
Top Gear lately. I like that show. It's kind of fun.
Kinda.
Yeah. It is. They had one on last night, the British version, where they were racing old SUVs with campers.
Are you watching the one with Clarkson and May?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have Pluto TV, and so whenever you turn the TV on, it forces itself onto some show. and we had these cold files channel on. It just, I don't know how it got on there. And so I just was changing it because I didn't want to keep seeing, every time you turn the TV on, when he murdered her, there's some scary little grim. It was scaring the kids. And I was thinking, if we could make the podcast more fun like that. We had little challenges during the podcast.
The challenge is to walk down the street here with some weed in your pants and not get arrested.
Walking down the street without getting winded would be a challenge for us. Okay. So, do you have anything to report to the FAA immediately, or wait and see if you catch any charges? Now, remember, this is the guy that was going through security with the vape pen in his pocket with marijuana. He wasn't arrested, though. Now, you may have some obligation to report this to your airline. I can't speak to that. I won't speak to that.
I refuse.
I can't do it. But as far as the FAA is concerned, you weren't arrested. You weren't convicted.
Yet.
Nothing's happened yet.
Nothing has been caught.
I don't know of any regulation that would require if nothing's happened, all they've cited you.
Confiscated.
Yeah.
They confiscated it? Did they cite them?
You were briefly detained.
Okay.
And cited for possession of control of substance. Now, again, I've not been arrested such as resulted in conviction or driver's license action. I've not, an arrest for this type of thing in and of itself is not going to trigger 6115 or 18V in theory. Check with your local lawyer, us, before you make a selection on that question. But that is something that I don't see any obligation to report. Now, in theory, should you? You could consult with your AME and say, hey, this happened, and see what your AME says, because you have 6153 obligation. Now, see, again, this guy was using it. It was in his personal backpack, he thought, right? So it's clearly this guy's using drugs, and he shouldn't be. You shouldn't be using drugs, even marijuana, while you're, holding an airman certificate.
So checking in for, I forget the...
It was an airline pilot.
So I guess there was a question of...
6150, yeah.
Well, being a safety-sensitive employee.
Yeah. I mean, he could have gotten a... you think
random,
TSA would have said, hey, we got a reasonable suspicion DOT drug test. That's a concern. So you've got a lot of little concerns there that I don't see as necessarily triggering an obligation to report right away, but is a good chance
to the
coming
FAA.
down. But if you have been using the substance, that's its own thing. You should not be doing that. And that might be something you want to discuss with your AME, because on your next application, you're going to have to say yes to 18N that I have been using it. And that'll trigger the need for the monitoring with the HIMSS AME for at least 2-year period. So definitely there's some concerns there that I would say. But as far as an outward obligation to immediately report it to the FAA, I don't see any obligation there. But there are some considerations.
I guess maybe if there was, if it was for medicinal purposes, right?
Even still, that's bad.
Well, yeah, no, I agree in theory, but it's not like it's a crime per se.
Well, maybe it's not a crime, but yeah, that's where 18N gets you.
And that's what I was going to say.
Or the underlying condition.
Right.
So I've got medical marijuana.
So maybe there's something in your medical history that you've not disclosed. So there's a potential falsification of your airman certificate. There's all sorts of rabbit holes you can go down on this one.
A lot of rabbit. That's quite the conundrum. But if the charges are later dropped or dismissed, are you still required to report it? Well, no, unless they're dropped as a result of attendance at an educational rehabilitation program. And if there was some use, you had to report that at 18N. So I think we've really got this one, signed, sealed, delivered, and I think we have allowed our listeners to possess the knowledge. And I'm sure they're sitting there right now saying, fabulous. Fabulous. Bring me 17 right now in a bottle of sauce.
And that's the chirping of the tires hitting the tarmac.
It's the slamming. If it's us flying, that's the tail hook being slapped off the back of the 172.
And so now you've logged an eventful half hour listening to us, the Ison brothers at the Ison Law Firm.
33 minutes.
That's more.
Yeah. That's
congratulations.
That's
you stuck in there.
Yeah. So
that's what they said about the needles.
There's really nothing else to discuss here. Our wives are happy with us. They're not malcontent, and they're happy to recognize us on the street as we walk past.
It's the opposite of everything we usually say. Yeah. Maybe they're on drugs.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.